Do you overanalyze text messages? Do you find yourself poring over every little detail of how an interaction went, wondering if the person liked you, if you made a good impression, what this meant or that? If you have a partner, do you wonder if your partner is going to leave you? If some of this sounds familiar, you may have anxious preoccupied attachment. Anxious attachment is a type of hypervigilance in relationships. It's this sense of always being on. The attachment system never really settles, and you're constantly scanning the environment, the relationships for potential threats, especially threats about being abandoned. And the way this forms early in childhood is from a kind of inconsistent caregiving. So the caregiver is there, yet they're not attuned and sensitive responsive to the child. Another contributing factor is the parent or caregiver that's multitasking. So for example, they may have the child close, even holding them, yet their attention is on cooking, television, cell phone, and other things. So the child never really gets good enough care or good enough responses, yet they're there nearby. So if you had caregivers that occasionally responded in a good enough way, and most of the time actually were inconsistent or unresponsive, what this leads to is that over time your attachment system keeps ratcheting up. The more you cry out, the more you signal, the more likely it is to lead to a positive outcome for you. But overall, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of anxiety and tension in the mind and in the body that leads to this kind of unpredictable sense of caregiving. And the association with love or closeness is inconsistency. And if you do have anxious attachment style, you may recognize this familiar pattern. And if you've been in a relationship for a long time, you actually may have gone through this pattern many times. So it's kind of hard to tell it all blends together. What you may find first is that you really like connection and you feel better when you're close to somebody. This is the second step. Even the smallest sign of the other person leaving or moving away, say they're looking at their cell phone, it could be literally anything. Triggers a kind of anxiety, a panic that they'll leave. Just for your information, most interactions do end eventually. That's a healthy and normal part of any social interaction. So there's this, it's not just that connection feels good, it's that it needs to go on and on and on. So you could have a great couple hours, a great day, a trip with somebody, but the moment you're gonna separate or leave, there's an anxiety that gets triggered. And that very same anxiety leads you to spin out, get hyperactivated. You may overthink, overanalyze, have a flood of emotions, and then go back to the person who's actually leaving and demand reassurance from them, saying, you need to make me feel better because you're doing this to me. You're wanting to separate clearly is causing me a lot of anxiety. And because there's so much energy and so much clinginess and anxiety coming at this person who may be saying, oh, I had a great time with you. It was so nice to see you and hang out, and now I'm ready to go and do the next thing. It's very common. It would be unusual for somebody to not feel like they actually need to get away now. It's like, whoa, where is all this coming from? I thought we had a great time, or whatever the interaction may have been. So typically the other party almost always withdraws and becomes cool, distant, more of a typical avoidant behavior. And as a result, the fear of abandonment intensifies even more. It's like, no, you can't leave. It's too much. I'm gonna break down. So it really is a hyperactivated attachment system where it's by any means possible you're attempting to recruit the person to stay close. And sometimes reluctantly the other person may cave in and stay longer, and then the cycle may repeat over again. And the reason you may feel this way if you have anxious preoccupied attachment is that early experiences with caregivers that are unpredictable creates internal working models of what we think relationships are like. So even though your current friend's partner may be reliable and consistent, you may still feel this intense anxiety that they may leave at any point or they may be unresponsive. So you go into hyperactivation, attempting to get their attention, signal to them, hey, I need you, because that's what worked in the past. And of course, this kind of intense overactivation may lead to more responsiveness from the other person because you do get their attention, but it comes at a cost because it's so exhausting to have somebody so unsettled in a relationship, to be close to them where they're clingy and need you. They may not be so good at tracking their own inner experience. They may be hyper focused on you. Again, in the beginning, that may feel good when somebody's that close, that attentive to you. Yet over time, it gets really like too much. That's how a lot of people describe their friends or partners who are anxiously preoccupied, is that they need a break because the intensity is so high. So how do you actually move towards feeling more secure and settled in relationships? And the move is relatively simple. So most anxiously preoccupied people are focused out, constantly tracking other people, guessing what state they're in, and most of the time the kind of tracking they're doing is not very accurate. So they may be projecting their own experience or taking in the experience of the other person as if it's their own. So if they're close to somebody who's happy, they may say, I'm happy too now. Or if the other person is sad or angry, whatever it may be, they're in that experience. So there's this constant attempt to get the other person to be in a kind of state they want to be in. And of course, that doesn't really work that well. You want to learn, if you're anxiously preoccupied, how to come back to your own inner experience. So the move is, instead of going out, you actually come in. And when you do come inside your own inner experience, you may find there's a backlog. All the times you felt dysregulated, all the times you asked out for attention, for care that was unmet. So there may be a kind of chronic anxiety. A lot of times there's a lot of anger because the caregivers weren't responsive. So these feelings may always be there, and you want to learn how to begin to settle and to regulate. And it's really a move down to down-regulate the nervous system. And you really want to figure out a way to begin to settle your nervous system and self-regulate, auto-regulate. And this may be funny because in the previous video I did on avoidant attachment, people with dismissive avoidant attachment are actually quite good at auto-regulating and self-regulating, which is the thing that preoccupied people need to learn how to do. So they tend to be able to feel better in relationships in a co-regulation experience, but it's not really true co-regulation because there isn't a mutual exchange of regulatory experience happening. So the first step again is to come back to your own experience and find ways to regulate the nervous system and really move it down. Meditation is really good for this. One is you can really begin to focus on your own inner experience. And the caveat here is, as you do that, your subjective experience may be that you actually feel like there's more anxiety because you're actively turning your attention towards it, so it fills your awareness. And then from there, if you can tolerate the intensity, you want to find ways to simply regulate the experience. Just being with it, holding it in your awareness, oftentimes is enough. There's other ways to do it. You can move your body, go out in nature, all kinds of ways. You can journal to learn to track that experience and to actually settle it. There's breathing exercises. There's really endless possibilities. You want to find something that works for you. And as you begin tracking your bodily experience, that the feelings of anxiety, the anger, you also want to learn how to track your thoughts, your thinking patterns, so the kind of stories that overlay this experience. And most anxious, preoccupied people have a lot of thoughts about relationships that go something from to swing between two extremes. So on one end, it may be this is a relationship, I want to be in this relationship. And on the other end of this, and these thoughts could alternate rapidly, the thoughts may be, I want to get out of this relationship. I can't bear to be in this relationship a second longer. So they love me, they hate me. There may be these alterations. And you actually want to begin to track these thoughts and see what the emotional, the bodily experience is as you're feeling all of this, and then connect them and actually regulate the inner experience that's so unsettling to you. You also want to begin noticing the anxious thoughts about the minutiae, the small details in relationships. So often there is a preoccupation with things like text messages or the way a partner is looking, where their attention is going. And you want to begin to see what kind of assumptions or what kind of thoughts you're having, like, oh, they took more than 5 minutes to text me back, they must not love me, the relationship is likely over. And if you have this thought once a day or for years and the relationship continues, whether you know it or not, right, this thought is quite extreme, it's threatening the relationship, so the anxiety is really high, the fear of abandonment is high. yet the relationship continues. And you want to actively work with these thoughts. Sometimes you can challenge these thoughts yourself and say, oh, I'm actually okay, or the relationship is okay. And I do feel worried when I don't get the response right away. And one of the other things you want to begin doing in relationship is actually communicating the distress and the anxiety instead of simply acting it out. And what I mean is you may become hyperactivated, get clingy, demand that the other person not leave without actually expressing that, oh, I'm terrified, or I'm so anxious, whatever may be happening. And the move towards security is to actually begin to track that experience, your own inner experience in relationships, and communicate it to your partner, whoever's there, and actually have a solid kind of backing of, this is my experience, and this is why I act out in this way. So then that can completely change the dynamic. Instead of really coming at the person and making them feel overwhelmed, you're just saying, oh, I'm so anxious. And generally people are much more open and accepting of that. They actually get a glimpse of, oh, okay, you're super anxious every time I leave, and even though we've been friends or we've been together for years, this still happens. So then they are much more likely to be empathetic and compassionate and actually engage in the way you want them to. And at this point, you may be wondering, is it possible to move from anxious preoccupied attachment towards earning security? And the answer is yes. There's a vast amount of research now showing that you can begin to work through this hyperactivated attachment system and settle, and also learn and develop the secure behaviors and internalize that experience, so your attachment system actually settles and then activates. So it's not simply just stuck in hyperdrive. And the main ways to heal anxious preoccupied attachment is to actually have secure relationships. So if you have an intimate partner that has secure attachment, you're able to form secure relationship with, that really helps to move into not only secure functioning, but also begin rewiring your own attachment system. You can also engage in therapeutic practices like the ideal parent figure protocol, sharpening your mentalizing and learning how to collaborate in a secure way in order to not only develop secure functioning, also remap the internal attachment system so you can learn secure functioning. And as we're ending, I just want to remind you that if you are finding yourself in this hyperactivated state and struggling with anxious preoccupation, the main things to remember is that you want to first learn how to self-regulate, how to turn your attention inwards and regulate the internal state. Second, you want to begin to track your thoughts and begin challenging them and also working with them. A lot of people find success in positive reframing thoughts. And you also want to kind of get some lightness or space with these really anxious thoughts. And also you can track them, for example, by journaling and saying, you may find yourself often catastrophizing and going to worst case scenario. And then if you do that over and over again, over days, months, and years, you may realize, oh, a lot of these predictions or a lot of places my mind goes, it actually rarely happens or never happens. And that can help you kind of ease up the thinking. And at the end of the day, you still do want to come back to your body, to the felt sense experience, and you may find that there's something there that's feeling dysregulated or distressing that's leading you to try to regulate it through thinking. And if you want more support with this type of attachment pattern, you can check out my specialty services on the website mindfulattachmentcoaching.com. We offer classes where you can learn more so you have a sense of how the attachment system works if you have anxious preoccupation. And also we offer a suite of attachment repair services like the ideal parent figure protocol, and you can find it all on the website.